Eh, a really good question. Sometimes I actually ask that myself. Probably uh, like a lot of people who collect stuff, it's a bit of a disease, I think. So a way back, probably around about the sort of late 70s, I used to sell programs for the club as a wee boy, just a young man. Uh, Used to go around behind the main stand and get your programs before the match and away and stand down at Dundonald Road and wait for the buses coming in from going in Saltcoats and got you into the game for free, although you could get a lift over in the old days. On the back of that, started collecting football programs and had gathered quite a significant collection of programs through the years, some really, really high caliber stuff. I got to a stage in my life where I kind of discovered music and such like, and I actually gave all the stuff I'd collected for years away, just to some kids that live locally for them to kind of get in the Kilmarnock bug. And then probably around about the late 90s, early 2000s, I came across a couple of shirts, players' shirts, and that started a bit of a journey. One just led to another. Getting back to then, collecting player shirts wasn't necessarily as common as it is now, and they were a bit more readily available. And it just kind of led from there, Kyle. So I've probably been collecting football shirts the best part of 25 years now. Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think, well, the volume of shirts the clubs have now is made accessibility much easier. So, for example, way back in the day, you had a home strip and an away strip that several players wore the one shirt through the season. It moved a bit, further down the line. There were then named shirts for each player, but they didn't necessarily have second shirts, third shirts, one-off shirts. The volume of shirts now have increased per player, per club. So there's a commercial side of that as well. But the biggest transformation, I think you've touched on it, Kyle, which is the accessibility. Before your eBays and your auction sites or even social media, accessibility to shirts was very much really only available through things like maybe charity events or actually being at the games and meeting players. That was how the kind of historical way of getting access, or through a contact that was really close to players. Now shirts are available, whether it be, as I say, your traditional auction sites, you've got social media sites, you've got Instagram posting left, right, and centre, you've got loads of. One of the biggest transformations, in my opinion, particularly for modern shirts, has been Matchworn shirts, the website, which you'll see almost every club putting shirts forward throughout the years. So the accessibility for me is the thing that has transformed collecting and actually has really expanded the sector. I don't, on the whole, go searching for a vast amount of stuff. I'll pick up bits and bobs if I think there's any kind of really interesting pieces of memorabilia, or I have anything that I particularly have maybe an emotive memory of, or something that just resonates with me from the club. I'll pick it up. But I do have a kind of healthy gathering of Kilmarnock FC history books. So I've made a point of that. They're really interesting from a historical aspect, way back to, books such as Go Fame, which was made in the 60s, quite a rare book now. But when you look at the history books of Kilmarnock and some of the kind of classic books from David Ross, etc., as a fan and even a football historian, they're brilliant to look back on. So as well as the shirts, I would focus more on books, but I pretty much have all the historical books that I need to get at this moment in time. I think there's probably a different, maybe it's slant that, valuable or of value. So But a couple of shots in the backdrop, you'll see some of the images here. One that holds. I'll come on to probably a couple then. One of the kind of special memories is one of my favourite players I've ever seen is Alexei Eremenko. And I actually have, in fact, you can see it just up here on the right. Alexei Eremenko's last game for Killie in his first spell was up in Motherwell on a night of torrential rain. The guy was a magician. I managed to, after the game, Alexei gave me his shirt and the shorts and signed a match ticket. So they have got a special place. I've also got an extremely special shirt, and to me, this is probably the most of value, not monetary, but special. As you can see just here, the A-Plant shirt. So that's from 1990 when Kilmarnock played Cowdenbeath, when Killie were pretty much in its knees, had been relegated all the way down to second division. And this was us making our way back up. Tommy Bunce had joined the club, etc. And that was a phenomenally important day for Killie to beat Cowdenbeath 1-0. Dave McCutcheon scored a penalty, and that enabled us to progress back up to where we are in Scottish football. And that shirt belonged to one of the Killie legends called Willie Waters. Very, very rare shirt, very historical game, and I feel really privileged to be the custodian of it. In terms of the most valuable, it's probably this shirt up here, which is actually the shirt worn by Dean Shields in the CIS Cup final in 2012 when Killie beat Celtic in that famous game. And I'm really proud to own that one. And in fact, I only came across that, sort of just before the start of the season this year. And I gave it its maiden debut at the magnificent KillieCon event that we had in the Park Hotel at Rugby Park. And really exciting for me, Kenny Shields, our former manager, was talking at the event. And when Kenny came across, he was pretty much taken aback when he realised it was his son's shirt from the match. That's the most probably valuable in terms of cost, but you can see the different positions I'm saying regarding sort of cost value and probably emotional value. I'm always kind of looking for shirts where they're more unique. So one-off games. So for example, I'm looking for testimonial shirts. I'll look for cup final or cup semi-final shirts. I'm looking for games which are quite significantly important, whether it maybe be in Europe. I'm particularly looking for shirts before pre-1990. So I'm quite specific. I'm trying not to go and just take any random shirt, although it's always good to grow the collection. I'm trying to focus on areas where they're quite difficult to obtain, or they've got quite maybe historical or particular game relevance. The very oldest one I've stuck in the back, this one here. You can maybe see, so that is really, really lucky to have this shirt. So this is from season 74-75. So that's 50-year-old. And the reason that one resonates with me is that's the shirts of my boyhood. That's the shirts when Killie wore when I fell in love with Kilmarnock. It's recently been reproduced as part of the club's retro shirt programme. And I think some people maybe don't necessarily like it as a shirt, but a lot of people, particularly maybe an older generation, love it because it brings back so many memories of phenomenal players. And for me, it's one of my favourite designs ever, thinking back to boyhood. But as I say, a 50-year-old shirt, that one was worn by Ian Fleming and Ian Fallis. And a couple of, if you watched the club away back in the day, and if you're fortunate enough to have seen them then, people like Eddie Morrison and such like, you realise the calibre of players that we had at that time. So 50-year-old shirt, I love it. One of my favourites in the collection, and as I say, interesting that the club picked it through the fans, etc., to have it as a retro, and it did sell pretty well. Oh, unusual shirt. I have one of the unusual shirts is probably a game. I've got a Matchworn shirt from when Killie played Shelbourne in the European Ventures in 1997, and it's an interesting shirt for me because it's the number 4 shirt, and at that moment, at that period, the number 4 was worn by our club legend Ray Montgomery, and actually, when it was put to me, it was given to me, and it was donated to the collection as a Ray Montgomery shirt, and it signed by Monty as well. But perversely, the shirt itself was actually worn by Martin Baker in the game. And the reason for that was at that period when it did in Europe, they numbered the players in alphabetical order, not with their club numbers. So Martin Baker being surname B, he was away down the lower end. So he became the number 4, but everybody thought it was a Ray Montgomery shirt. The other one, which is quite unique, which is a really, really unusual for collectors to get a hold of, is a blood shirt. So I've got a shirt. I'll not go into the details of it, but I've got a shirt from a Kilmarnock player just from a few years ago that was not in the best of conditions, covered with his blood, and it managed to find its way into my possession. When I discuss it with people, they're not particularly impressed, but I like it, so that's all that counts. I would always love to get one where you can see somebody maybe getting it ripped off their back or something really damaged, because then you can totally relate to the game or the incident. But they're very rare as well. Trying to explain it to myself first. It's a passion, and I feel I'm at a stage in my life where I feel I'm doing this now much wider than for myself. So I'm really, really honoured to be working with various groups now doing shirt displays. So, for example, I was working with the club and community a couple of years back with the Football Memories group. So I was taking shirts along and various other pieces of memorabilia to support their Football Memories meetings. I was very fortunate to be invited along with Carl and Monty to do the KillieCon from the Forever podcast in August last year. And I had a very successful display. That was brilliant. Recently I was working with the match day get together for the Killie community, where we turned up before a game, and that was working with them. And we've got a couple of other events coming up in January, February, where I'm going to be doing displays with the Killie community again, and also an event for the Killie Trust. So for me, the collecting to kind of almost just capture a bit of Killie's history has been one thing, but it's now led me to, I think, something personally is a bit deeper, which is sharing the wealth of shirts and a bit of history, and providing just a bit more support into community, a bit of interest to our fans. And that to me is really, really rewarding. And I feel like, quite proud to have the shirts that enables me to do so.